Let's go.
Welcome to Citizen. We have a very special guest today. Special. Bryan Callen. It's nice to see you again.
I like the name of your podcast, Citizen, which comes with responsibility.
That's the point, right?
Yeah. And I think the founding fathers talked about virtue being an important part of citizenry.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, that's kind of the premise of the show. Obviously, people have seen it before and know this, but you can either bitch and moan about politics or your circumstance in life and how things are and blah, blah, blah. And with that comes typically you wait around for somebody else to secure your rights for you, right? Mm-hmm. But then you're a subject under their rule because they dictate precisely the scope of those rights.
Yeah.
Or you can secure them for yourself, and that is the literal definition of a citizen.
Yeah.
I don't understand why that's so goddamn hard for people to understand. I mean, we've been sliding downhill for quite a while in Western culture, but I think one of the primary issues is that there seems to be a massive disconnect between personal effort, and outcome. Right? At some point it flipped. It's like we expect a certain outcome, and regardless of what we do on the front end, if that outcome isn't met, then we have to find something to blame other than ourselves for it.
Yeah, but sometimes I wonder if we went back 40 years and you had podcasts. Let's just say you had podcasts. Mm-hmm. I wonder if men our age wouldn't be saying the same damn thing. So it's always something to be on guard for, and the debate rages on, and the grand experiment continues. So I don't know. I think you're right about all those things. It's like that. You always go back to that Ben Franklin quote. We created a republic, madam, if you can keep it.
Yeah.
It's being a citizen is to always be. Not only just constantly vigilant, but I think also open to other ideas. Even if you get to be my age and you solidify pretty, you kind of calcify, which is not flattering. You kind of like go, well, I know what bothers me. I know what triggers me. I know what I believe. And here's my evidence for it. But it is important to stay a little bit open. So I had John Stewart was saying, he said, look, when it comes to systemic racism, and when I hear that, I go, oh, geez, here we go. But I'm a white guy. And you and I, if we were black, would be having a different conversation. I don't know what that conversation would be, but it'd be potentially different just because we'd have a different experience. And he said something. He said, what I'm talking about is internships are how you fold into a corporation or into a good job. You learn taking an internship, which is essentially a job you don't get paid for, and then you get to know the powers that be, and then they fold you into the company and you do that. The problem is because a lot of black and brown people can't afford to work for free. They can't afford to come out of college or high school and just do an internship because they got to pay bills. They just can't afford it. You have the majority of interns just happen to be Asian and white.
Right.
It's just the way it is.
Well, I think part of it is also that, selective association. People tend to hang out around people that look and think like them. That's how all human beings work, right? And it isn't just the good things like family, internship, job, blah, blah, blah. It's also crime, right? The vast majority of crime is intra-race.
Yes.
Like, black against black, white against white, so on, right?
Yes.
So
because they live together.
Correct, yeah.
Well, like all of us are like this. I walk into this studio and I'm immediately feel comfortable. I just know how everybody. I tend to dovetail with kind of the belief structure, with the symbolism, with the credo of this place. You and I hit it off right away because we speak about the same things. We're interested in the same struggle, and so no apologies for that, but also staying open to kind of other ideas and keeping people around you that you don't agree with.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's important.
Smarter.
You don't want to be in a fucking in an echo chamber. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And I think I think we got comfortable at some point, and then we started looking inward too much. You know what I mean? And it's to me, that's the wrong instinct. One of the principles of the show is that no matter where I am, I'll be a leader, and leaders eat last, right? Like you're a parent, you're a husband. You take care of your fucking family first.
Yes.
And the difference, I guess, is from like one of the things that we need to work harder on as a society, I think, is one, making the family unit cool again. And I'm not talking about just the religious version of that. Just make the family cool.
I couldn't
again,
agree
right?
more.
And the other part of it is this psychological principle called kin selection, right? It's how we, throughout our life, determine who falls under the umbrella of our family protection as men, right? Like who do we consider to be part of our family? Because it isn't, the vast majority of those people are not going to be blood relatives.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's your friends and people you've met along the way, your coworkers and shit like that. But because of these social dynamics and just the way things work, typically it is people who look and think like us, unfortunately. So you have to make a concerted effort to get outside of that comfort zone.
You do, but I think that the most fatherlessness is a major problem. And there's I was in Jordan, and in Jordan, I love that place, and I love the people, because what I found was, then I talked to the guy. He lives on a family compound. By the way, divorce, good luck. You don't do that shit. You get married. That's the way it is. You have kids. Your sons never leave. They bring the wives to you. They get married. Then the wives go to the other family.
Generational homes.
And they're all together. So you have 15 kids playing and running around together and stuff like that. And I said to him, do you have a lot of therapists and people who are on antidepressants in your society? And he started laughing.
Yeah.
He goes, I'm just not trying to be, insulting, but I don't know any therapists, and I don't know anyone who has to be on SSR, because they have their whole family there. And I don't care what anybody says, it's not being anti-gay. It's not being, any of that. I'm saying the family unit is a beautiful thing. That yin and yang, male, female energy in the household, all that stuff is part of, probably more natural in some ways, because it's more prevalent.
Sure.
Historically and everywhere. It just is what it is. It just is what it is.
Well, normal just means average. It doesn't mean good or bad, right?
And it also doesn't mean I don't want two men to get married who love each other. I don't have any problem with that. But that's I believe in individual liberty. I don't even think the government should be in the business of marriage. But please don't attack the nuclear family, as if the nuclear family somehow is the patriarchy and an offshoot of all these things that you think are tyrannical.
I wonder what that is. I'm sure it's a combination of all these things, but I wonder if it is just outside influence of people trying to keep us divided.
No. I know exactly what I think it is.
Yeah, tell me.
I think it originates in bad ideas in an echo chamber called higher education. I think in the Harvard and Yale and Stanford and Princeton, you can say whatever you want, but they have real cachet. Williams, Brown, Dartmouth, all these schools in the Northeast, where higher education began in this country, where some of our greatest leaders and thinkers and industrialists came out of. There is real mythology around that, and more than mythology. They were institutes of higher learning where you didn't learn what to think, you learned how to think.
Yeah.
And it was rigorous. MIT, all these things that started in where the country is, this republic was basically founded. The intellectual energy, the intellectual architecture that gave rise to all the things we think about, whether it's the Supreme Court checks and balances and all these things, cold weather, where it was hard dealing, just waking up in the morning.
And the guy was a philosopher and a farmer at the same time.
100%. You know what I mean? Where books, where it was almost this Protestant Reformation in this country, where for the first time the citizenry. You had people like George Washington who said, I didn't fight this Revolutionary War to become the king, to become George II. I did this because I believe that I should serve at the leisure of the people. Yeah. It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean,
they solved the political problem.
Yeah. Do you think it developed because there was no safety net, maybe?
I think what happened,
the founders knew that the institution that existed at the time, which was the British Empire, didn't give two fucks about us.
Well,
except for what
British
they could
system-
extract out of us, right?
Well, but the British system is also the great chain of being. It was also a monarchy. It's also the idea that the king is closest to God,
Right.
and then the aristocracy, and the landed gentry. And by the way, there was something about your blood, literally your blood, that carried with it royal bearing, a higher birth. This is not unusual to societies. The caste system in India. I mean, everyone
Being
that
born in the purple in Rome and Greece. Yeah, it's
all
the
of
same.
it.
It's the same
Everybody
thing.
had a higher birth. You had slaves. You had a hierarchy. This country, the insanity of this country was the idea that, yes, I know we had slavery, of course, but at the end, and that was contentious.
Yeah.
That was hugely contentious with the founding fathers until the cotton gin was invented, and all of a sudden you called it white gold. You had all this free labor, and you had an ability to ship all this cotton, blah blah blah. But what I'm trying to say is that the institutions of higher learning that captured our imagination as the smartest people in the world, that the philosopher kings of God. If you went to Harvard, you were set for life. You dovetailed right into some amazing investment bank or an amazing with the country club and a law firm and all that. I think what happened for Jordan Peterson's way better about this, but what happened was the women with the second wave of feminism. Women said, we need our own studies. What about women? What about the idea that, can we study our own history? And the women's department gave rise to all these other things. And then you had this influx of these philosophers like Michel Foucault and Jacques Derrida, who came up with these ideas of non-binary. When you have a binary male-female, when you have tall, short, when you have hot, cold, you automatically favor one over the other. So, so our language, the logos created a prejudice within us. And so you had all these ideas, and for whatever reason, they were so energized. And they, by the way, all came from the same area code. All of these thinkers, like Judith Butler, they were academics, and they pushed out anybody
mostly
who had
pedophiles as well.
I'm sorry,
Mostly pedophiles as well.
Well,
not all of them, but quite a few.
I don't know, but I do know that you don't have to even get into that without. But you can win the argument just by saying that anyone who had the notion of a conservative ideology. The idea that the individual should always take precedence over the collective, that spirited debate in good faith and protocol is how you get to things. Somehow that was all pushed out, and you had these academic institutions that were purifying their echo chamber. And this started in the 60s and 70s. Yeah. But it had reached its boiling point probably in 2012 with the Obama administration, and all these people started taking power there. And then it just gets carried away, man.
I think that the conversation around the individual versus the collective is one of the most misunderstood and then poorly argued from the conservative side, right? They will say that individual liberty comes first, and a lot of it is rooted in the way that it's presented seems very egotistical, very me, I'm important, but that's not the point of individual liberty. The point is that when you prioritize the individual prioritizes the group. That's the fucking point, right? Yes. It's just like being a good manager in a business. If you micromanage, you will have inefficiencies and you will lose customers and employees, right? Because people don't like that shit. But if you empower the individual, if you read any book on management, one of the key things, one of the biggest problems in any corporation is when middle to high level managers don't empower their subordinates with the authority to do the fucking job they need to do, right?
Yeah, and it stifles innovation, right?
Correct, yeah. And you see it all throughout society now as well. The more the individual, the more rights the individual has, the less concerned with their own rights they are, and the more they pay attention to the suffering of other people. That is an iron law throughout all of human history. It's always been like that.
It's really interesting. I never thought of it that way. I do know that one of the things that the way a lot of societies are structured, like Japan, for example, which is the idea that you total devotion to authority and total subservient to the person above you, out of respect, so they don't lose face, was everything. So you didn't even drink a better whiskey than your boss did. And the problem with that is that it stifles innovation. It's not an accident that Shotokan karate is not represented in the UFC. It was because nobody was challenging their master. Just the fact that you had a master was already a problem. You go to Brazil and you start learning jiu-jitsu, your instructor is trying to beat you and you're trying to beat your instructor. Your instructor isn't off limits. That was a very Asian idea. You know, Americans are like, I'll kick my, I'm going to get better than my instructor. I'm going to I'm going to go study this, that, and the other thing. That mixed martial arts, that's very American. It's very interesting. It's an amazing invention. It just keeps evolving. And Americans are mixed mental artists as well. That's the strength of us. And when you herald the individual as more important than the collective, you allow that person who was nobody to become somebody tomorrow because they came up with an idea that was creatively destructive to the old way of doing things, and because they came up with a better way of doing things.
And that's nature, right? I mean, it's a plant growing.
Well, that's also why no one is in our area code. I'm talking about the United States. No one is in our area code in terms of innovation when it comes to technology or even when it comes to artistic innovation. Maybe Britain is a close second, but and Korea, by the way.
South Korea is really good.
Yeah, because they said in the 80s, South Korea said, let's export our pop culture the way Hollywood exports its pop culture. We'll be that to Asia the way Hollywood is that to Europe. Really genius, and they pulled it off.
It is true, yeah, and it's it's bureaucracies don't work anywhere.
Yeah.
In nature, plants growing, old leaves, old branches need to die and fall off. They fall to the ground. There's something called, if you're not familiar with a permaforest, I think you would be interested in this idea. But it's a forest that serves itself. There's no need for any. Once it's set up, there's no need for any outside influence, and it can feed families. You know what I mean? So it's like the leaves fall to the ground and refertilize the soil. That's how it works. You know what I mean? And when you look at that in broader culture, something that's failing being propped up by a powerful institution only cascades more failure. That's what it does. It amplifies the original failure, and then it spreads the failure out over a larger period. The best thing you can do is, if you realize that something's not working, stop doing it and start doing something else, right? But there's no...
Or you'll go broke.
Sure, yeah. I mean, emotionally, mentally, and financially broke, right? So it's like, how do you handle that shit these days? I think I don't know that if it's just bureaucratic mission creep that happens, inflation happens and stuff like that, but it does seem like to some degree society is kind of conspiring to load more and more unflexible responsibility onto people, like a 30-year mortgage, for example. That wasn't a thing back in the day. Why in the fuck would it be? Why would you spend 30 years buying your house? It used to cost $9,000 to $12,000 to buy a house in the 1950s, right? And it is, I think, I'd have to look the number up, but it is not relative to inflation, not even close, right? So it used to be, and then in the 80s and 90s, the general standard was you spent 3 times your annual salary on a home, right? Whatever and that was a pretty good indicator where you were financially. But now it's 10x.
God damn.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
like,
crazy.
What the fuck, man?
I don't know how that happened. I don't know the genealogy of that kind of phenomenon. I don't know.
Well, the theory I heard was in 1971 when we left the gold standard. If you watch,
I've talked to too many finance. I've talked to too many real financiers about that. Guys who are really in the marketplace. I like listening to dudes who've made a lot of money.
Yeah.
And because they really understand the details. Every time, it's like Jeff Dye has that great joke. Where he's like, why does everybody who's into cryptocurrency, why does everybody who's trying to sell me on cryptocurrency have 3 roommates? You know?
Yeah.
It's like, I listen to the dudes that really understand markets and have made a lot of money. And when I mention the gold standard, they look at me, they're just like, it's like saying to Dustin Poirier, hey dude, this kung fu shit, you ever heard of kung fu? How come you guys don't jump in the air and kick?
Yeah.
And he'd be like, oh fuck, man. I mean, I'm serious. That's what they look at me that way. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So, because it's just, it's too complicated.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, they asked me to explain how it would work, and I had read this thing, and it was just, I got so embarrassed. I was like,
explain how a non-fiat currency would work, like a standard back currency.
It's very hard because derivatives are amazing, because derivatives are a way of spreading wealth, and it's why people can own their houses. I'm not saying there aren't trade-offs.
No, it's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Or no, I'm sorry, Wonderful Life, right?
Yeah.
Like your mortgage or your money is in his house, his house, right? Yeah, certainly.
There are ways to. You're not going to stifle creativity. Part of what happens is there are ways to get wealthy, and there are ways to play with currency that are good, that are effective, that are innovative, and you're never going to stop that unless you had some heavy-handed, idea that this is the way, and then we'd be in trouble. So
yeah,
trade-offs.
Well, we're getting to the point now where people are so profit motivated now that it's hard to get. The barrier to entry on new ideas can be rough these days, and I don't mean just new businesses. I mean, if you wrote a perfect comedy movie right now and went out to get funding, if you had done that 15 years ago, probably wouldn't have been very difficult to get funding for that. Now it's fucking impossible, right?
Well, that's because the business model is so weird. So now nobody wants to hear about it unless you can sell it overseas.
Right.
So, that's why horror movies and action movies are the only thing you can get financed.
Comedy probably doesn't translate to Mandarin very well.
That's the problem. Comedy doesn't. It's very it's just national. And so when a comedy does get financed, it's almost an accident. Isn't that? Although everybody's bashing Barbie, and I saw it, I got dragged to it, and I never would have seen it otherwise. I got to tell you, conservatives better be careful, because you're bashing a movie that's undeniably creative and funny. I'm not going to get into what it says and stuff like that. It didn't matter to me. I was watching it going, damn, they pulled off a movie about Barbie. Ryan Gosling's hilarious. Margot Robbie's hilarious and great. And it was just funny. It was just stupid and funny. And everybody's looking at the social message. But that's almost to miss the point. Like, that's where conservatives got to be careful, because now you're going to sound like a stodgy censor. Don't do it, dude. Don't do it. Like, you're the guy in the corner going, no dancing over there. Yeah. No dancing.
Fucking fun, please.
Yeah, you said the word patriarchy. Don't be it. Don't be that. You're going to look old and stodgy. You're going to lose it. You're going to lose that game because they're too funny. You had Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach, who wrote that shit. Funny motherfucker. Smart. And are very, very aware of what they were doing. They were messing with everybody. And it was genius. And I was watching it, and then I hear Ben Shapiro and these guys making fun of it. I was like, don't do it, guys. You sound like an Amish dude in the corner saying, don't dance.
Yeah, it is. I probably won't see. I mean, maybe at my house at some point.
See it, because you'll appreciate the intelligence. Like, you'll appreciate how they pulled it off, because there are a lot of, what they've been trying to get that movie off the ground in Hollywood forever, and no one could write it. All these great writers are like, I just can't break the story. And Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach, these two quirky independent filmmakers who are married, said, let's try it. And they wrote it, and they did it. And then you got this, I'll tell you, Ryan Gosling.
He's awesome.
Oh, bro, playing shredded and playing Ken. I'm going to not give the movie away. There's a scene where all the Kens have a war. On the beach, and they beach. That's their job, is they beach. It was so stupid. Yeah. And the joke's on everybody who makes fun of it. Now, Mark Maron, who I love Mark, but Mark had this sort of social, this sort of like social commentary on it about how it was great for feminists and No, okay, I mean,
it's a comedy.
It's a comedy, bro, and it's silly, and it was very good.
Yeah. Nobody does glib better than Ryan Gosling.
God, dude.
He's the best at that.
God.
And I don't know if it's like he's been hot since he was like 10 years old or something.
He's been acting since he was 10. You're talking about a master.
Yeah.
This guy, you want to talk about 10,000 hours. This guy's got 20,000 hours. He does shit that is so subtle that nobody does. You only get that from being an actor forever. It's like he's come all the way around, and God, his humor.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, he's. I feel like he's really carried it over like there are some people who didn't persist through the changes in Hollywood.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he's had no issue, and he seems like the exact same guy he was 10 years ago.
He is.
You know what I mean? Which is nice and good for him. But
He found my dogs one time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's why I like him.
What kind of dogs?
I had a pit bull that ran out, and he found it and waited at a gas station with my dog until somebody picked it up. And this is before he was even that famous.
Yeah.
He had just done The Notebook, and it was pretty cool.
So let's talk. I want to talk about entertainment a little bit. I think it's, I went to seminary when I got out of high school. I don't believe in anything really, but
My dad did too.
I felt like studying comparative religion was the best way to understand human beings, because that's like how you're trying to justify your existence, right, through all of this art is what I think it is, really. And I think if you really wanted to look in modern culture, maybe not religion so much, but in modern culture, if I were an alien coming to this earth and I wanted to see what life was like in since media began, right, like actual digital media, I would probably look at comedy first, because art has always been very subversive, right? Like in Rome, there's a town crier, but there are also people drawing pictures of Brutus stabbing Caesar in the back and shit before it ever actually happened. You know what I mean? And that was a whole thing. Shakespeare was primarily dissenting against the crown, right? He's kind of an asshole. Somehow stayed alive, or unless you believe that anonymous theory, that it was like 14 different authors.
I think he wrote it.
Yeah. But it's always been like that. And, it's a good balance between, it's the emperor's new clothes, right? Like you need people who are like, but you can't just be a dick about it. If you're screaming into a megaphone all the time, like if you're standing outside of Barbie screaming about the social issues inside of Barbie, I tune out pretty quick. Yeah. But if you do a bit on it about how, it was funny, but here's how it was also stupid, I'll listen to that, right? But it's
satire.
It's becoming,
satire is very powerful.
It's so important, but it is. Some people say that you can't get comedies made anymore, so it's starting to go away. Obviously, shows like this, independent media, your show, Fighter the Kid, and other shows like that it's still there. Obviously, stand-up comedy's made a huge comeback since the late '90s. I mean, it's bigger now than ever, probably.
It's crazy, right?
So it's still there, and I don't like the fatalistic attitude about it. Like we just can't do that anymore. Like we can do whatever the fuck you want, right? You just got to be like, that's the challenge, is to become more creative and find your new avenue to put this.
Well, this kind of stuff,
out.
podcasting. People talk about our speech being stifled, but I was talking about this on Rogan yesterday. It's like, listen, man. At the same time, I can say whatever I want on the biggest platforms on the planet. And I can also confirm my bias anytime I want on YouTube. My algorithm is always lying to me. So, I think we're all good.
Yeah.
In that sense. There is a lot of pushback on either way. We're still America, and I appreciate that. And I think we're as political as ever. And people have strong opinions. Now sometimes I worry that it's like I have this joke that I don't think anybody under 30 should vote because you got bad ideas, but that's not true and not fair because young people move things. But that's an old guy talking.
Yeah, I mean, other than George.
What were you saying about? But so you're saying, what was your point about entertainment though? What
I'm curious, what your thoughts are now on how, so the issue will be monetization, right? It is. Regardless of what it is a social construct, it is also a business for people, right?
Yeah.
And it is, we have reached a point where a lot of folks have been able to turn their podcast side hustle into a career, right?
Yeah.
Like ours has always been pretty big, so that it's always been easy for us. Not easy, but it's always been there for us. But I've seen quite a few people start in their garage as we did, but years ago, and now they're doing real shit. They have huge audiences, and the audiences are quite a bit bigger, but I think there's something about the decentralization of independent podcasts that keeps it behind the curve a little bit when it comes to monetization, because big companies want to spend money for sure, but they aren't looking to go. It's a huge lift and a lot of work and a lot of payroll to go granular on some of this stuff. You know what I mean?
I don't think we have a choice though.
No, we have to do it. I agree.
I am always. I'm just a. I tend to be such a free market guy, but not because of an ideology, just because I don't think we have a choice. Look, you either have a service that people want to buy or not, and you either know how to sell that service or you don't. Yep. And you either know how to get your signal through the noise or you don't. And man, that's an ever-moving target. And trying to stay relevant or heard in this sea of amateur or this sea of noise. Everybody has a mic and everybody has a camera now, and everybody can do something and organize. So, are you in the business of spectacle? Are you in the business of true entertainment? Are you in the business of intellectual exploration? Depending on what your niche is, I think not only are we the onus will always be on the individual creator. But there is a good side to that, which means we have a great deal of freedom to do what, how, and when. And the old gatekeepers and the old guard is not as relevant anymore, especially with AI and especially with the fact that we consume story and music the way we consume candy. It's just always there. It's become a shot of dopamine. Good luck competing with TikTok and Instagram, but I think you can. I think you actually can, because that stuff is a lot like porn. There's only so much you can do to the brainstem, and there's something that happens when all you do is stimulate the brainstem. You start to spiral. You become an addict.
Sure.
And that has a shelf life, and nothing replaces substance, great art, original expression. So. But look at these streaming companies, man. These streaming companies like Netflix, what they don't want you to know is nobody's watching their shows.
It's the .com bubble of our generation, isn't it?
It is.
It is a giant fiscal paper tiger.
It is.
And like Giorgio actually talks about it all the time. The same thing with Uber and all of the food delivery services. They've all been subsidized by big tech money, but none of them are profitable.
None.
Not any of them.
I couldn't believe it.
So some of the biggest companies, this is not a good thing for a national economy, that some of the biggest companies that exist are not profitable. That's a bad deal, especially when we're $30 trillion in debt already.
Well, they're waiting for automation and for technology to catch up so that they don't have to pay human beings and worry about human beings. But, okay, that's just a gamble that venture capitalists are willing to take.
Sure, yeah. I mean, over a long enough time period, they'll probably win.
Maybe.
But the vast majority of the individuals in the company will lose.
Yeah.
Which is that's not a great business model.
It really is crazy.
Say what you want about Henry Ford and how big of a Jew-hating cunt he was, but he aligned his selfishness with hey, look, I want to sell as many cars as possible, so I'm going to make them affordable to the people that work for me.
Yeah, there was something tangible and measurable.
Good business model.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, right? Yeah. And now every motherfucker owns one or two cars. You know what I mean?
That's right.
But there's no version of that in this latest creative destruction that I can see, right? Like, because now they're talking about UBI and you'll own nothing and be happy, which is a different thing than people used to say.
Yeah, but I think what you're going to see with AI, there's, again, dark side, good side. I think AI, you're probably going to have way more affordable housing, because building a house on a piece of land and actually using the actual materials on the land you bought to build a house through AI and robots is going to be not only possible, but you'll have a house in 5 days. It's going to be kind of nutty. So,
like iRobot but I guess they were going the other direction. It was tearing the house down, but similar, right?
Yes.
And I've seen some of those. It's like prefabricated walls, and then it's filled with material from the site that you're actually on at the time, right? So you're delivering. You still have to pour a foundation and shit, but you're delivering a couple of pieces of wall, and then everything else is just kind of getting put together there. That's promising. I mean, a lot more
3D printing.
Yeah,
which is going to allow you to make everything you need in the town you're in, so you won't have trucks everywhere. Part of progress is not only creative destruction, but major human disruptions.
Sure, yeah.
How do we fit into the future? I don't know.
Well, that's the thing that could, I agree with you. I think AI is a great thing. Some of that is probably because, as a former infantry guy, I kind of fantasize about zombie apocalypses, which you were in Range 15,
yes.
and robot wars and shit like that. There's part of me that wants that to happen just so I can go fucking go out like a champ. But
Yeah.
also, just the ability to, it's like a laser or a microscope. It amplifies our ability in a lot of ways too. But what concerns me is then once we displace, we've seen it in the last 2 generations of Americans. Once we displace these needs on Maslow's hierarchy, once they become automated, we tend to lose ourselves pretty rapidly, right? First thing we do is look in the mirror and then look inside of ourselves, and we're not pleased with what we see there, and we blame everybody else for all the things we see inside of ourselves, but take no real tangible steps to improve it, right? That's what's happened over the last 50 years in America and other parts in the West. But it's not an excuse.
Right.
It's a problem to be solved, right? So I that is the part that I worry about. Where are we going to find fucking purpose again? You know what I mean?
That's probably something that follows you for the rest of your life.
It should.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about the old male businessman who retires and dies 2 years later. You know what I mean? That's the trope that I think about and not that you shouldn't retire and enjoy your life, but I think like you retire and then you get a fucking puppy.
Yeah.
Something to take care of. That's that trope about the guy that didn't want the dog, but now he loves him. Of course, because he's a fucking leader. He's a dad. He's a masculine figure in life. That's no matter what the guy says, he wants that dog. I promise you, even if he doesn't know it yet.
Yes.
So I wonder how we start to replicate that. And then, my solution, I like to hear your thoughts on this. My solution is I like to keep government as small as possible. Midgets. Right? No, that's 30 Rock. I like to keep government as small as possible, and people talk about that a lot and very rarely have any kind of plan to get there, right? Yeah. But there's only one way to do it from the citizenry level, and that is to solve problems that the government solves before they can get there to solve them. That's how you do it. You box the government out by solving problems, they're like Tinkerbell. They only have power if you all believe they do, right? And I look at this complete absence and purpose in the male population in the United States. And it isn't one particular age group. It's from fucking prepubescence all the way through, our age. And
outdated machinery.
Yeah.
Muscle and aggression is considered to be a liability.
But there are people out there, you talked about fatherlessness. There are people out there who need this stuff from us. Like the country and human beings in general need to be defended, but there are young men, especially young boys to young men that have no male role model at all. So we have, I feel like I'm going fucking crazy right now. We have this massive amount of both urban and rural kids without dads. And then we have all these adult men with no purpose. And nobody's thought to, hey, maybe we should put these two fucking groups together and solve this problem.
I think that the reason someone like Joe Rogan is so popular, your podcast is so popular, is because it's men talking about these things and also providing guidance. And I think the reason jiu-jitsu schools are so full, I think the reason people want to move to Texas and own guns and grow an aggressive beard is these reasons. We still have hunter, fighter, provider, protector instincts that are deep within our DNA, and if we have to simulate that, we will, and we do. Now, there are healthy ways and unhealthy ways to do it. Video games are exactly the reason boys are so obsessed with video games is that simulation. It is war games. It is all that stuff. My son loves killing, his avatar. The avatar across from him. And so the boys are going to find outlets for their aggression. You need healthy outlets for their aggression, or they'll turn it in on themselves.
I mean, it's like an unshielded electrical cable, right? It's not intrinsically evil. It's just not developed properly.
Yeah,
that's
part of what it is like you and I like trying to make plans to have dinner. That's important. Why? We want to go to our favorite place because there's something about that place that somebody built by hand, and that food is great.
Yep.
And there's something about that's kind of really intriguing. So I don't know, man. I think that the Middle East and Europe has figured it out better than we have. They take time for lunch and dinner. They take time to be with the family. Divorce in the Middle East is still super taboo.
Yep.
And there's a reason for it. It's because you obliterate and detonate a family, which I've done, and my kids have to deal with. It's not good. There's nothing good about it.
Yeah. We've spent a lot of time since the late 80s, I guess, probably, Murphy Brown kind of championing the single mother. Yeah. And good for that. I mean, like, certainly that is not the easiest thing to pull off.
Right.
And if you're a single mom that happens to raise good kids, then you've outperformed your peers, frankly.
Oh, yeah.
But that is a cautionary tale. That's not the goal.
It's a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
It's a great way to put it.
I mean, it's
not the ideal. It's a cautionary tale. It's hard.
It's hard, and for the kids' sake. I mean, and this is true in every facet of life, from physics with matter and antimatter, and in a military unit, you have a commander and a first sergeant typically, right? Or one officer and one NCO who are in charge of that group of people, whatever it is. And one of their jobs is to lead, and the other person's job is to make sure that you have all the stuff you need. You know what I mean? That you're taken care of, that your fucking bills are getting paid, all this other shit, right? It's mom and dad. It's mom and dad everywhere, from physics all the way to our fucking daily life. And politics, the left and the right, making sure that we are strong and providing for ourselves and keeping ourselves safe, but also empathetic to the needs of the people, right? We need both of those fucking polar things going on in whether it's physics all the way up to the family unit and national politics. We need all those things to be present for us to be well adjusted and prepared for life.
I think almost, I was just thinking as you were talking that probably everyone agrees with you. We have this tendency to think that, we're talking about the family unit. And all of us in our mind have this tendency to think that there's a group of people who in the quote unquote LGBTQ community that don't agree with us. They actually probably do. People are so complicated. And, so I don't think that your message is lost on anybody in that sense. I know that there are people that make a living being professional provocateurs, contrarians, and there are also people who are genuinely angry at something else, and they have a straw man like, I don't know, a straight white male like myself as their enemy. I get it. Just like I have my straw man. But probably when you start speaking as reasonably as you are doing and backing it up, I think that most people would have a really hard time finagling their way out of that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to strip away all of the virtue signaling, all of the party noise, all that bullshit.
Yeah, but see, the problem is all of us have a story. So what I'm realizing is that, facts are very irrelevant to all of us in a lot of ways. I think because there are endless number of facts. I think all of us are living a story, and all of us have a story that sort of is the bedrock we are anchored to. My story is something like personal responsibility. You are responsible for your own actions. You can make your own life if you work hard enough. All these things that I was raised with. And it's not true necessarily, but it's certainly my ideal it's the ideal I reach for. I believe in a transcendent truth. Whether a transcendent truth exists or not, I think it's important to behave like it does. All those things, I think that it's important to reach for a concrete answer. I don't like relativism. I don't like the idea of, who can be sure of anything? I don't like that. Yeah. I don't think that applies to the level of detail.
No. I mean, it's like quantum social theory almost. I mean, that's not a thing,
yeah,
right? And dude, if it is,
it's
we
fine.
we can't understand
make the trains run on time that way.
We can't if that is a thing and principle somewhere in sociology, we can't understand it, which means there's no way for it to be applicable in any meaningful way, right? So what the fuck's the point? I mean, talk about it, sure, but don't try to make policy based on that stuff.
Well,
it doesn't make any sense.
Like look, just take the grid, the electric grid, and the infrastructure that gets food on our table, that gets carbohydrates, proteins, and fats in our bodies. That's very hard From the farmers who have to rely on the National Weather Service to know when to plant seeds, when to harvest, when it's going to rain, when it's going to blow. These are all really important things that none of us. It's an intricate ecosystem that there are people out there that are like, I don't have time for your ideology or your quantum social theories.
Right.
I got to do this. I got to actually move this thing to here.
It is a luxury of the privilege to be able to even think about that.
That's why guys like you who have been to war, like if I start talking about, world peace, got to love each other, and you go, hey, I've seen really bad things. I've seen what happens when a society breaks down, where men who are monsters take over with guns and are willing to do shit you can't believe. So you go, that's cool, but let me tell you, since you guys are walking around talking this way, if the grid breaks down, you're going to be calling men like me who have experience with my beard and the fact that I can shoot straight, because I promise you, you're going to be dying for me to be there.
Yeah.
So there's something called objective reality that someone like you had to live. Like Evan Hafer, who was the CEO of Black Rifle Coffee, but he was a Green Beret, and he'd spent a lot of time in war, and he said, in war sometimes it all comes down to physics.
It's one guy with a gun and another guy with a gun.
Yes, it's physics. Yeah. The truth and the law is physics. Say whatever you want about your religion. Say whatever you want about your politics. Say whatever you want about how it should be. I'm dealing with the laws of physics.
Yeah.
I better get out of the way because there's a bullet coming right at my face.
Yeah.
That's interesting to me.
It is, yeah.
That holds authority over me. Because I hear that, and it's like, that's why I like stand-up. You come to my show, I'm either going to be funny or I'm not.
Yeah.
And we'll see, Yeah,
but there's room. I 100% agree with that. At some point, no matter what the discussion is, it comes down to one man with a gun and another man with a gun, right? That's how it goes.
For everyone.
And the purpose of politics is to avoid that. The people, my assumption is that people like Romulus, for example, and maybe even before that, had seen the horrors of never-ending war and developed politics as a way to fucking avoid that shit.
Man.
You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, or there is something that Nixon wrote, I think it was called Real Peace, maybe it was Kissinger, read it a long time ago, that said you have to take the profit out of war. You got to take the profit out of coups and out of the man with the biggest gun. When the man with the biggest club rules the society, it's not that stable.
Right. Yep.
Because there's always another guy behind him waiting to do that. So
somebody
if you can take
to challenge him. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why dialogue, not fisticuffs, is really important in political debate.
Yeah. It's also why you should exercise the principle of charity at every opportunity, right? That is to say, you take what the person is saying to you at the best possible and rational meaning, instead of saying, so what you're saying is, and then followed by some bullshit. Right?
Well, but also keep in mind that there are different kinds of strengths. If you're using strength with one metric, you're going to get Somalia and Afghanistan. You can't just be the guy with the biggest muscles.
Yep.
The great thing about this country is that we recognize that there are strengths that some of our gentler spirits have that make our culture really interesting and provide what's called creativity and all the goodies.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs couldn't bench press a lot. Einstein couldn't do CrossFit. But, I'm glad these guys were around because they came up with some really interesting things. Prince was 5 foot nothing. But he wore high heels and a bouffant. But I liked his music.
He was a good baller too, apparently.
He was. I've stood next to him. I was so shocked at how small he was.
Tiny
he was
old
a
man.
legit dwarf. Legit, like he was a proportioned dwarf. Is dwarf acceptable? I don't care.
I don't care. Yeah,
I don't give a shit.
He
was a true dwarf.
Didn't you play a Puerto Rican in one of Ross's movies? I think so.
I don't know.
We're beyond all this stuff at this point.
I was also in blackface on Mad TV. Somebody found it.
So was let's see, Jenna from 30 Rock. Everybody's done blackface.
Yeah, I mean, it's that was 1995. Fuck off.
But in addition to recognizing that everybody has value, and I think that's a really important part too, because there's nothing the fast road to nihilism is feeling no investment in the things around you and feeling like you have nothing to offer. That's That is the biggest variety of poison socially that exists on Earth.
Yes.
Forget about all the cult
Amen
stuff and
to
all that
that.
stuff. It is the individual not feeling like they have value to provide for other people, because that's how you define your existence, right?
Yes.
By that. It is the way that we've tried to treat post-traumatic stress in veterans has been a complete failure because of that misunderstanding. People think that we need to have a pat on the back or like, hey, it's okay, buddy. Like, no, this is a human being who has been defined by their purpose at the ultimate life and death level. You can't come in with platitudes to talk to somebody like that. They don't need your sympathy. They don't even need your empathy. They don't need a pat on the back. They don't need to be told it's okay. They need the next job to do. That's what these men do. Women as well to some degree, but mostly it is men that deal with those problems.
Yes.
And that's what they need. Like,
somebody said something cool about that. They were like, men don't need a pat on the back and a hug. What men want to feel is significant and important, and they'll go through all the hardship to feel that way. They'll go through all of it. They'll crawl through mud literally on their stomach and starve
fight wars,
themselves.
build society, right?
Yes,
I mean, that's we know this.
Yes.
And still, I can't tell if it's just like the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And there's also some degree of safetyism and treatment and shit like that as well. But they were perfectly fine getting everybody addicted to Percocet, right? So you can't just say that it was a failure of empathy. You know what I mean? Like, there was some coordinated effort to get people addicted to shit as well.
Yeah, man. That's a good point.
But it's, everyone, this is how we define ourselves, through the value that we provide society, whether people believe that shit or not. That is how you as an individual define yourself. And then, as you mentioned before, I think this is really important. It's the principle of charity thing, but it's also, everybody has their story. They got their own perspective. If you look at the way a house is built, if you go to different towns and houses that were built in different times, they're going to have different structural design and different features and shit like that. It's the same thing for any human being that you run into. And that's like one of the most famous pieces of art of all time, or it was until recently. It was Rashomon, right? And it's the story from different perspective of a very violent event.
Yeah.
From the victims.
It's an Akira Kurosawa movie. Have you seen it?
Oh, yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like something terrible happened, and you hear about it from the perspective, it's a rape, but you hear about it from the perspective of the victim, the assailant, witnesses, so on, right? And not everything in life is that serious.
Right.
But every conversation you have with somebody, particularly about things that are meaningful in their life, is going to be, it's going to be, that is the package that it will come in. And it is your job as a human being, as somebody who actually gives a fuck about, it's not about you caring about that individual person. It's about you caring about what happens around you in your society, right? And if you care about that shit, it is your job to unpack that person, right? And understand them. And just because you don't agree with their method of solving a problem doesn't mean that the fucking problem doesn't exist.
Right. That's an interesting point. I was thinking about the quote Robert Evans, the great movie producer, said, there's three sides to every story: your side, my side, and the truth, and nobody's lying.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Again, it depends on the story that you're telling yourself. We solved a lot of the world's problems so far. I hope you guys were writing all these things down, because, I feel like we can send this out to everybody.
Yeah. Well, it's the I don't think it's all that difficult, frankly. I think it's not difficult to solve these kind of problems. I think it's easy to get distracted. That's the issue.
Well, I think that there are two ideas. Meaning will always be hard to come by. Adventure will always be hard to come by.
But the struggle to get there is kind of the point, though,
It is
right?
the point. It is the point. In intimacy, living truthfully, all these things are probably never going to lose their challenges, and they shouldn't. But I like the idea of just, there are a couple conservative sort of precepts. Mm-hmm. One is that human beings are flawed, and we always will be. We're kind of doomed from the start.
Right.
So don't look to perfect, self-perfection is a a fool's errand.
Sure.
And so is perfecting society. Creating utopias in society is a very, very dangerous idea.
That's why we said a more perfect union, not a perfect
that's
union.
Right. That's a more perfect union.
Exactly.
It's a big difference.
Yeah.
Because, and so that leaves you with what? Trade-offs. I know I don't have the perfect solution. I know capitalism has its pitfalls. I know democracy has its issues and it's messy. But compared to what? I'll take these trade-offs over the trade-offs you make when you put the collective over the individual, like socialism and communism.
There's also the implication when you say something like to create a more perfect union, the implication is that it requires constant maintenance, right?
Constant maintenance, tending to your garden. I loved Jordan Peterson. I always quote him because he's just a biblical scholar, or he's just whatever he is. I love that when he said, even the Garden of Eden had a snake in it. God couldn't even keep, danger out of the Garden of Eden. That's kind of crazy. It's like, whatever you do, just don't eat that apple over there. And don't let that devil get in your ear, Well, good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Because being curious is a sign of intelligence.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah, I think I think we're all kind of very susceptible to the is-ought fallacy. You know what I mean? Like, life is not fair. It sucks sometimes. It's tough sometimes. And we think to ourselves, well, it shouldn't be like this. And that's a fair thing to say because it makes you want to improve the situation you're in and improve the situation for others. But when you start to believe that should is, now you're in fucking trouble.
Yeah, because you're gonna blame and be a victim. Know this. The universe will treat you unfairly.
Yeah.
Know this also, that you will lose more than you gain.
And eventually you will lose everything.
That's right. And so know that is a huge part of life, and it's supposed to, because instead of thinking about what you can get from the universe, think about what the universe is trying to get from you. I'm sorry I'm using words like universe, but instead of God, because I don't want to get too religious. But anything bad that happens to you you can attach meaning to that, which is the following. Oh, this thing is made me very uncomfortable. I have lost this. I am full of depression, anxiety, and fear and sadness, whatever. What is that event trying to get out of you? What kind of inner growth are you supposed to undertake as a result of this great opportunity, this gift that's been given to you? If you don't accept that, good luck, because I don't know where else you go from there. I'd way rather think that way because it makes sense to me.
Yeah, it does make sense. I mean, it's photosynthesis. It's fascial tissue tearing and repairing itself. The thing that makes life valuable as well is that it ends, right? What's the implication of that? The only reason that life has value is because it ends. The implication to me seems obvious. It's like you've got this life to fucking perform in, right?
And there's a time. There's a clock on it.
There's a clock on it. And how are you going to choose to spend that time? And that's why, for me, my upbringing was pretty rough. But
it was?
Yeah, even beyond that.
What was your upbringing like? Because you're very intellectually curious.
My dad was really abusive.
Oh.
But
interesting.
You
talked to him?
No.
How long has it been?
What year is this? 10 years probably?
You just decided one day, fuck it?
Yeah, but even before then, I hadn't spoken to him in years. So
Really?
It's been 15 probably total, somewhere around there. There's no value in that relationship for me.
Yeah.
You know?
Were you going to say something to the effect that you wouldn't be who you are without him?
That's part of it for sure, yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
In a way, it's as fucked up as it is. It's like, thanks, Dad.
Yeah. And the other part of it is that I realized through that process is that life is not about you. Everything meaningful you ever do in your life will be in the service of other people, right? Especially, it's easy for me to say especially as a man because I am one, but I think it is especially incumbent upon men to take charge of that specific part of your life, right? Like all this shit exists, all the comforts that you experience on a daily basis, to include your own personal safety, are a result of the work of men that came before you. You know what I mean? And what are you doing to not just honor that sacrifice, but what are you doing to make sure that people will look back on you and be thankful as well?
Yep. What does sic semper tyrannis mean?
Thus always to tyrants. It's what Brutus said before he stabbed Caesar.
Wow. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's also what John Wilkes Booth said before he shot Abraham Lincoln. So it's not completely noble,
Really?
right? Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Sic semper tyrannis.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate how you think, and I appreciate the struggle. And I think that as you speak, I keep thinking you're going to make a great dad. You just need some kids.
Yeah, we'll get there.
You got to find the right woman.
That's the
most
difficult
important
part,
decision you can make.
Yeah.
But you will.
I will, yeah.
How's the dating life in Austin?
Oh, I don't know. I've been working, but I'll get into
It's
it.
shitty, huh?
Yeah.
Maybe stop spending all this time with all the boys.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
you guys with your cauliflower ears and your dicks. Get some women in this. Go take a dance class.
Oh,
Go
boy.
take a salsa class. That'd put you out of your fucking comfort zone.
Yeah, it would.
I recommend you go take in earnest. I recommend you, Dan Holloway. You, Dan, as JT said, fist fuck Holloway. Go and take go learn how to salsa, merengue, cha-cha, and all the other Spanish dancing things, and you will find a dancer, a woman in her body who is an artist and an athlete at the same time, because there is no other room for you, my friend.
Yeah. It's got to be a peak performer for sure.
100%.
Well, that's good
You think
advice.
I'm kidding? I'm telling you, brother.
I know.
Step into that arena. I've been taking dance class. It's fucking awesome. Me and my
Do
wife.
you get like a fucking discount on your if you bring more? Is this a fucking pyramid
It
scheme? Or
should be. It should be. But no, I haven't come to my house. Me and my wife take. My wife's a killer dancer, so
Yeah.
we do this. But I'm a big fan of doing stuff like that.
Yeah?
Like the opposite. Yeah, especially a guy like you. Especially a dude like
It'd
you.
be funny because I have absolutely no rhythm. So it'd be definitely starting from
You
the
think you
ground
don't have
level.
rhythm, but you'd have to let go of certain. You'd have to break down certain walls in your head, which is why I think dance would be amazing for
Okay.
you. It
Yeah, I
sounds
like a
nuts.
challenge.
Oh,
I like
it'd
a
be
challenge.
sick.
Well, look, we got to get out of here. I think
Yep.
you got a thing to go to as well.
Yeah, I do.
What else you got to say to these dicks before we get out of here?
I just think what's important about this is that we have these conversations. I love talking to you because, I learned last time we hung out, I was like, this dude's on my wavelength in terms of being a searcher, being a bodhisattva, a guy who's just trying to get to the truth and working hard to expose yourself to the best that's been thought and said, and then making up your own mind. And I also think it's significant and pretty cool that I give you a dance class as a challenge, and you're willing to take it. That's kind of ballsy.
I've done dumber shit than that.
Yeah, but you're not afraid to stay uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no risk in embarrassment. I don't believe in that shit.
No.
That's all in your head. That
We're
shit
all
doesn't
white
exist.
belts anyway at
Yeah,
most
yeah,
things.
yeah.
The thing about life is you can only be good at probably one or two things, and if you want to be really good, you probably just one thing. So I don't know. That's kind of what it is. But I love doing things that take me out of my comfort zone, and a dance class. For all you macho motherfuckers out there, for all you dudes with your beards and your guns and your knives and your jujitsu and your CrossFit gyms, dance class. That's my assignment to all of you. That's my last thing. Get into a dance class, not ballet. I did that for 2 years. That's a bullshit dance. It's boring. I'm talking about Spanish shit. Get some Latin rhythm into your hips and your heart, and you'll be better for it.
I like that. It's good advice. Well,
And all the best looking, all the great creatures, these women that bring you to your knees, that curl your toes, they can be found there. Gold lies in them thar hills, kids.
well, there you go. It's the salsa gold rush of 2023.
There it is, baby.
Thank you all for listening. Thank you for coming, by the way. I appreciate it.
Dude, anytime with you. Anytime. I love it.
We'll do it again sometime soon. Thank you all for listening. This has been Citizen.